Good morning, Bill, or should I say bonjour?
Oh, bonjour, Florent. That is the extent of my French.
Well, we're talking about Canadian market today. We're thrilled, to share with all of you some insights that we've been able to collect over the last couple of quarters, and we'll deep dive into Q4 and some insights over 2025. I'm Florent, the co-founder and CEO.
And I'm Bill Ferro, and I am the co-founder and CTO at Paren.
All right, so let's deep dive and look into the charging infrastructure expansion. So before we get there, actually, I want to share briefly what we are and who we are. We are a data platform. We cover 95% of the fast charging infrastructure over the US and almost the same numbers in Canada. As a platform, we are a neutral aggregator and we process in real time insights over all these ports, and we also have historical data. This report is an opportunity for us to share what we have seen across the Canadian market. And this is what we are seeing right now across 2025, the number of ports being deployed in Canada. Bill, do you want to walk us through these?
Yeah, this is interesting. I mean, by our numbers, there are around 8,800 ports total in Canada as of the end of 2025. So effectively adding 28% or almost 30% to that list makes the much of the infrastructure relatively new. And we'll keep that in mind as we walk through some of the additional numbers.
And 28% is pretty much also what we have seen in the US. So it's very interesting. In the US, when we reported across 2025, we have seen a 30% growth on the fast charging infrastructure. So obviously not the same baseline in terms of fast charging ports available at the beginning of the year in Canada, but the same trend. So looks
But I
like
thought they
supply
were
is
slowing down.
growing.
I thought everything was slowing down.
That's what I've heard as well, but that's not what I'm seeing.
That's not what we're
Surprising.
seeing. Absolutely.
Let's take a look into what has been changing quarter over quarter. On the left side of that screen, we have the number of fast charging ports that are being deployed, and on the right side we have a ratio of ports per station. But let's take a look at the left slide. I'm seeing some like charts going up, but what do you have?
Yeah, again, if you look at this number, it's actually very seasonal and it makes sense and it's comparable to what we see in the US. A lot of the infrastructure is designed and permitted at the beginning of the year and then is built out through the rest of the year. We know it takes anywhere from 10 to 18 months to actually build out and get a charging station energized. So seeing them come to fruition in Q3 and Q4 makes perfect sense to us. But again, when you look at it, 1,200 of those 1,900 ports occurred in the last 6 months. And that, again, interesting as how that will play out as we look at other metrics, comparatively speaking. Now, when we
And
look
also
at, okay,
maybe just build one thing on this number, and we deep dive slightly more into the full reports, but we are also seeing a different mix of power and slightly like more slower ports in Canada than we are seeing in the US. Like, can you talk about that and like 24 kilowatt ports?
yeah, one of the charts in our report, not in this summary, but one of our charts that you can see if you download the report, it talks about the different power breakdowns. And where we see, for example, in the US, where we see 24 kilowatt ports is typically in the back of a dealership, an auto dealership. Where we see them in Canada is actually, I think, cleverly designed and utilization. It's basically use the right level of power for the right dwell time. So outside of hockey rinks, you see 24 and 50 kilowatt charging stations, which makes perfect sense. If you're there to, watch your kid play hockey and you need to charge to get back home because you're on a travel hockey team. And so you're working to, that's the right mix. And in some cases, as we get to pricing, they charge less for 24 kilowatts versus 50, 100, or 250 kilowatts. So it's really a completely different mix than what we're used to when we see in the US. And those
That
those
was
charts, I think, in the report are fascinating.
Yeah, exactly. Fascinating. And on the right side, of this chart, of this slide, we are seeing two bar charts. One related to the number of port per station at Tesla station. It seems to be going down. I'd love to have your take on that. And then the other one, which is for non-Tesla station, which is which is going up. So what's going on here?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Again, interesting for Tesla in Canada. In the US, they have around 52% of the overall market for DC fast ports across the United States. In Canada, they have much less. It's more like a third. And so it's small volume here. So they deployed, I think, 15 new stations in Q3, and then only 7 in Q4. And so when you look at it, it becomes laws of small numbers. And they deployed several stations in Q3 that were larger than 16 ports. In Q4, they deployed 0 that were larger than 16 ports. So their average went down. But it's to me, it's not a concern. It's Tesla doing what Tesla does best, which is quickly rolling out good-sized charging stations where they're needed along the national corridors. On the flip side, when you look at the non-Tesla hardware that's being deployed, it is actually very good to see these numbers increasing. We know that there are new players coming into the market and existing players who are building out stations that are 4, 6, 8 ports in size. Again, different from what we have seen in years past, where stations were 2 or 4 ports. So to see that number going up is I think something that we're going to continue to see as the infrastructure continues to get built out.
Absolutely. Now let's take a look at demand. So we've looked at supply, growing number of ports. Let's see if demand is actually growing as well. And what we are seeing here are the last 6 months of sessions that we have seen in Canada. Walk us through like some of these. We see some high numbers in the summer and then growth, from September to December. What's going on?
I think there's really 2 things at play here. One is typical summertime travel. And again, this follows patterns that we're familiar with in looking at these details. A typical drop off in September, everybody comes home from vacation and stays home for the first month of school or first 2 months of school. And then we start to see it pick up along the end of year holidays. And very interesting to see these numbers increase towards the end of the year. And I think it's partially due to folks having a better confidence in the network, in the broader network as a whole, and the ability to travel long distances with their EV, in addition to trips more likely to ski areas and other winter activities, as well as an increase in vehicles in operation.
Right.
So
The number of people getting
all that comes together and is a really good positive sign for people using their EVs to go on their winter holiday trips.
Absolutely. One of the things that we'd like to do as well is that to combine, this slide where we can see demand growing with the growth of the EV charging infrastructure. So the next slide is actually combining these two with one new line, which is a red line or the orange line, which is sessions per port per month. Can you walk us through, what's going on between July and December in session per port per month?
Sure. For first, sessions per port per month is a way that we use to try to create a metric that is not going to be so dependent on the underlying volume, right? As the volume increases, you generally want to see sessions per port stay within a specific range. And so we see in July, especially in August, where it peaked that it peaked at around 180. When you see it again, looking at in December, where the number is more like 170, it's showing that the demand is the infrastructure is keeping up with demand, or demand is absorbing the new infrastructure, right? If the demand had stayed the same as in August, this number would be going down. It wouldn't be going up, right? So again, a very positive sign. Also very positive that it's not exponential. It's not 200 to 300 would mean that demand is outpacing infrastructure. So there's a steady balance that needs to be met here. And I would say in Canada, they're very close or at that equilibrium.
Yeah, 100%. Let's talk about average utilization rate. We're talking about national numbers here. I mean, from the slide before to the one you're going to see right now, we want to share the trends at the national level. We'll have the opportunity of deep diving at some of the province level. But at the national level, we're seeing utilization rate, and we wanted to compare that to the US. Can you do that for us, Bill?
Yeah, so again, US has been fairly consistent over a period of time at around the 16.5, 17% range. And we're seeing some of that same consistency in Canada, but at a lower rate, right? So Canada population is very much concentrated on the coastal regions and within the main cities, and there is just a wide set of geography in between that you need EV charging in order to build out the infrastructure, but you're not going to get the 38 to 45% utilization out of those chargers. So when you merge it, when you aggregate it all together, you get this 11.9 number. I think it's a fairly healthy number. Again, lots of room for growth here, but as you said, it is regionalized. When we break that down into the state level or province level or the metro level, the story is different.
And this is actually what we are getting to. And this is one of my favorite slides because thanks to you, Bill, I can learn more about my Canadian geography. So I can't wait for you to walk me through like all these provinces. But we're talking about national average of 11.9%, but we're seeing more in a few provinces and way less in others.
Well, if you go and look at the highest populated areas of Canada, this makes perfect sense, right? You've got Vancouver and in British Columbia on the West Coast. You've got Toronto, Quebec, Montreal, more on the East Coast. And so that's really where the utilization is concentrated. Even so, it's not concentrated as high as, for example, as the state of California, which sits at around 28%. So again, there's room for growth both in the infrastructure here at some levels, as well as driver opportunities. And we know that Canada has recently announced some improved return of incentives for EV drivers. So we expect that the number of EVs will increase, and we think that looking at these utilization rates, there is room for certainly room for those vehicles to charge in the public infrastructure if they're needed.
Right. We're also seeing like some pressure at the CMA level. So in the report, we'll look at the top CMAs, and Vancouver, for instance, is one where the demand is very high because you have a lot of rideshare drivers, but you also have people not in the capacity of having home charging options. So there is a greater reliance on the public charging infrastructure. So it's interesting to see, the province trends, but also like to look into the specific CMAs to see where the demand is actually growing and where it's in need of more charging options for people out there.
And we're seeing some of the 2026 growth plans in those same general areas,
Right?
right? So there's room to grow and fill in and help those local drivers.
Absolutely. Something that seems to be fairly stable is price. We're talking Canadian dollars. We're talking before tax, but seems stable, right?
It's very stable, and that's a good thing. Yeah, again, prices vary in different regions, but when you take it at a station level and aggregate it together, it comes out to a fairly reasonable rate. And I think as we'll see on the next slide, we can talk to, for example, where it is the most expensive in Alberta and Saskatchewan, and where it's least expensive in Quebec. And there's reasons for that, right? So in Quebec, we know that a lot of the charging stations there are based on utility programs, right? So utilities driving the deployment, and typically utilities charge less than other public infrastructure, at least for a while. And so we're seeing that again. These are pre-tax numbers in Quebec.
Quebec and also like British Columbia, we're seeing, the same trend. Another trend that we are seeing as well, and that is in the report, is about the type of pricing strategies. And there is something unique in Canada. You want to tell us what it is?
Yeah, unique relative to the US, right? So in the
Yes.
US, we primarily look at the industry has moved to per kilowatt hour, right? So whether you're a fixed rate, a time of use rate, or even a dynamic rate, you're being charged per kilowatt hour consumed. And in Canada, especially in the Quebec province, there is the concept of this power. We call it power-based. So you're paying based on the power your vehicle consumes. So a Chevy Bolt will never consume more than 50 kilowatts of power. So they're never going to be charged the 300 kilowatt rate. But then you look at a Porsche Taycan, for example, and its rate is going to vary throughout the entire charging session. It may pull 225 kilowatts at the start and then draw its way down to 100 kilowatts, then down to 70, and then down to 40, right? Each one of those points is going to be a different price point based on the model. I like to say you need kind of an advanced math degree if you want to determine
Looks like it.
how much you're going to pay for a particular charging session. You need to understand your charging curve for your vehicle, and as well as the outside temperature, your battery temperature. There's a lot of factors that come in. I don't know how well you can actually predict the cost. I guess over time you get used to it, but it is interesting. And so what we do is we take an average of the different varying rates, and we use that as the average for that station.
Absolutely. Let's take a look at reliability as well. These numbers are pretty solid, 93.2.
And it makes sense to me when you dive down deeper into it, right? Go back to the beginning of the conversation. We saw a 28% growth. So nearly 1 in every 3 charging ports is less than a year old. So we certainly hope that new infrastructure is reliable. We also know that there are replacement programs going on where some of the stations that have been around for a while, hardware is being replaced. And some of the replacements we're seeing are actually leveraging hardware that's from Europe that is much better attuned to the low temperature environment. So we see that they're going to perform better. Again, it's early days for a lot of this new hardware. We
Right.
want to see how it maintains its ability to be reliable. And reliability isn't just about the hardware; it's about the CPO's infrastructure for maintaining and keeping their stations up and running. So that's why we track this, so that we can see, if things change over time, is it indicative of a bigger problem? But really good, strong start for at least our first report here.
Absolutely. And maybe since this is the first time that we're reporting over the Canadian market, I mean, we're talking about a score here. This is not an uptime percentage. This is a score that combines, multiple factor of the charging experience. I don't know if, Bill, you want to say a few words about that, but the scale is up to 100. And what's behind that score?
Yeah, it's a score of 100. It's generally based on what we would call first-time plug success. And so it factors in the ability to get a charge when you plug in and walk away. It penalizes for retries, it penalizes for failed charging sessions, and it also penalizes for downtime. So again, if it's new infrastructure, not expected to be a lot of downtime. And so we're seeing some very positive activity here.
Great. And that concludes our review of the Canadian market. I mean, the main takeaways are that the infrastructure is growing, plus 1,900 ports over 2025. It's a 28% year-on-year growth, very similar to what we are seeing in the US. We've also seen that demand was growing as well. We've seen seasonality over the summer, but we've seen like a continuous growth toward the end of the year. And that demand is actually at the national level, creating an equilibrium in between the new infrastructure rolled out and new people getting an EV and using the public charging infrastructure. What we've seen as well is that pricing varies per province. Bill talked about utility programs that eventually brings price down, especially in British Columbia and in Quebec, but overall stable pricing, at the national level, but some local variation as well. And the very good news we just talked about is that reliability is very high because hardware are brand new and network operators are also investing in replacing the hardware infrastructure. If you want to deep dive more, so this is a snapshot. Bill, you want to walk us through like what we're seeing here and pointing people maybe to how they can read further about it?
Yeah, sure. So this is a snapshot of ours, all the numbers together in the report. And so you can download the report at the link attached to this video. And there are many more slides and more detail that we go into behind all of these numbers, as well as some text and explanation behind where the growth is, why the reliability is there, the different pricing models and how they play out, not just at the national level, but also at the regional level.
Absolutely. And maybe just a quick thank you, to our team who has been working with us. We have our data scientist, Aruchi. We have our business operation manager, Laura. And we had a special help, from Scott Charabura, who is a known expert and leader in the EV industry in Canada, who has been helping us in putting this first report together. Thank you so much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. He didn't help me learn any new French, but he helped me learn a lot more about the infrastructure and the goings on within the Canadian EV charging market. So,
thank you so much, everyone. And we're looking forward to hearing back from you. If you're reading the report, let us know if we can do better the next time. And hopefully you'll find this as insightful as it is. Thank you so much.
thank you.